just how heavily hit the altcoin base had been, with so much capital coming into Bitcoin, not necessarily rotating into altcoins. It used to be, if you wanted to get a gain on Bitcoin, you've got two options. One is to take leverage risk and risk liquidation, or you rotate into altcoins, particularly when it was a bullish setup and Bitcoin was sort of tracked under resistance. I think Bitcoin's trying to get past 2 trillion, and there's about 900 trillion of total global wealth. So little of it's been allocated, and it's so small that any bit of wealth that comes in, you get a 2x because you put $1 trillion in.
Is Bitcoin about to skyrocket to unimaginable heights? Willy reveals how new market structures, like BlackRock's ETF and MicroStrategy's massive Bitcoin buy-ins, are setting the stage for a massive bull run, and why retail investors are barely noticing.
I think this cycle, just looking at the impacts of, I think the key impacts right now, MicroStrategy going on full flight on their Bitcoin acquisition, and then the BlackRock, in particular spot ETF, but the whole broad collection of spot ETFs coming in and offering a very efficient way for TradFi to buy. And so that's really changing the structure of the market. So looking at that type of impact, and you can see also, I'm looking at just how heavily hit the altcoin base had been, with so much capital coming into Bitcoin, not necessarily rotating into altcoins, and just how absent retail has been in this cycle. I mean, it looks like they're just starting to come in the last 4 or so weeks, but it's been a ghost town. So yeah, just very interesting to see how much of each, the structure of each cycle is changing, and probably the hidden side is I'm kind of figure out if more of the sovereigns will come in, and maybe they are coming in, but quietly. I do think it's taking it away somewhat for one sort of class of investor that's got the brokerage accounts, probably much more experienced. It used to be, if you wanted to get a gain on Bitcoin, you've got two options. One is to take leverage risk and risk liquidation, or you rotate into altcoins, particularly when it was a bullish setup and Bitcoin was sort of tracked under resistance. People would rotate into altcoins to get that extra pump, extra beta. And you're not seeing that this cycle. And if you look at you rotate into altcoins because you get extra gain on Bitcoin historically with no liquidation risk. Effectively buying something like a MicroStrategy or a MicroStrategy on 2x is producing the same sort of zero liquidation risk environment. But if anything, you're getting the same kind of, magnified returns if you time it right. You've got to still be careful with MicroStrategy because there is that kind of premium to NAV, like the underlying Bitcoin valuation. And so that could completely collapse if you think that you're buying it at a particular price, whatever it is. Let's say it's $450 and it's trading 3x its underlying Bitcoin valuation, then you're going to get a 67% pullback if the market turns bearish. So, at an extreme case. So that's kind of similar to what you're going to get on altcoin. At least that capital is going into the underlying asset of Bitcoin, which is driving the entire ecosystem, and it's not being, siphoned off into 10,000 projects, of which probably only the top 5 or the top 1 or top 0.1% are actually going to execute in a way and produce something productive. At a few, initially, maybe earlier in the cycle, I was thinking, look, you can buy an ETF or you can buy MicroStrategy, and an ETF is going to charge you maybe 20 basis points or something like that per year, 0.2% to hold it. So you work that over a 20-year hold. A fair percentage of your Bitcoins are going to be lost to management fees, whereas you could buy MicroStrategy, and with a long-term hold, it's still got a profitable business, though that's a very small part of, the AUM now, and they're going to stack sats. Number 2, they're in a situation where they can get almost next to free borrowings by Bitcoin. And now they've got this at the market offering where, this new mechanism where as long as it's selling at a premium, they can buy more Bitcoin and, issue stock, dilute the stock base, and effectively, as everyone knows, use that cash to buy Bitcoin. And that has an interesting impact because the amount of, as you're trading at a premium, it means there's a lower amount of Bitcoin per share than ideal. And as they issue more stock, stock and use that cash to buy more Bitcoins, it's anti-dilutive and the concentration of Bitcoin per share increases. It sounds a bit Rube Goldbergish as a machine, but if you look at the underlying of it, like the mechanisms, it's just opened up this completely huge gateway for fiat investors to convert into Bitcoin through this machine that concentrates more and more Bitcoins per share over time. And so I think that's the second reason why it's getting an increasing premium. And you look at that premium, it went from under 1 at the bottom of the bear to now consistently touching around 3, and it's a straight line up. And then if you look at what's happening next year with the stock, is that MicroStrategy is going to move to FASB accounting practices, where their gains on Bitcoin is considered a net yield or revenue, in which once you trip over that criteria, you are now allowed to be listed in the S&P 500, and all that prevents it from being listed now is a committee decision once this accounting practice goes in. And so by the start of next year, there's a lot of people speculating that it will be listed on the S&P 500. That index is an incredible amount of money. And so there's this behavior that happens as a company lists up on the listing day. For months prior, there's a run up in price, and then on listing, it sort of goes sideways. So there's some amount of hedge fund activity that's front running the listing and speculative activity. And so we could be seeing that happening as well if we think that it will be listed on the S&P 500 in the first quarter of, say, next year. So with all these impacts that are happening, they're all kind of bullish, but we need to be careful that it is trading at a premium. And whether or not that premium starts to come back, it could be quite painful since it's run up so high.
Willy Woo explores the game-changing dynamics in Bitcoin's current market cycle. The entry of major players like MicroStrategy and BlackRock's ETF has shifted the landscape, offering traditional finance an efficient path to Bitcoin exposure. Woo notes that the lack of retail participation so far makes this cycle unique, with institutional capital taking the reins. The influx of funds into Bitcoin has left altcoins behind, showing a clear preference for Bitcoin over riskier assets. What's even more fascinating is the potential role of sovereign wealth funds quietly entering the space. Woo explains how Bitcoin's small market cap in comparison to global wealth means that even modest inflows can significantly boost its value. The structure of this cycle could lead to explosive growth as more institutional money enters. For investors still thinking they're late to the game, Woo reassures that Bitcoin's potential is still in the early stages. This is just the beginning.
So absolutely, yield is this thing that is being dirtied by crypto in 2022. I think that word is going to be cleaned up in the cycles ahead. I don't think we're going to have another 2022 touch wood where, oh my God, we can do all this, in quotes, decentralized finance, bring it all to retail and do crazy crap behind the scenes to grab as much money as possible by hidden people. If I'm getting more Bitcoin than what I paid for the share price, that might be yield, okay? You'd get that if you buy it at the bottom of the bear market when that premium is trading at 0.8, right? And then you might get a 25% yield if it's going back to 1 in the number of Bitcoin. Beyond that, you're basically getting a higher valuation for your shareholding, but no more Bitcoin. So you're just trading beta, the extra gain above the market, and that can collapse down to 1 or even 0.8. And so I don't think yield is something you take away with you, right? It's like fixed income, and you can do other things. So I don't think it's yield. Yeah, it's beta, I'd say. But there's definitely much safer yield now if you're looking long term without this expansion contraction you might get in the bull bear in basic arbitrage trades. I think Bitcoin's trying to get past 2 trillion, and there's about 900 trillion of total global wealth. So little of it's been allocated, and it's so small that any bit of wealth that comes in, you get a 2x because you put $1 trillion in, suddenly Bitcoin sort of asymmetrically grows to another 2 million from the $1 trillion you put in. So put $1 trillion in, it's 2, it goes to 4. And so it's going to grow quick. It's BlackRock's opened up the door, but it's so early still. Like, no one understands what this stuff is. Like, the banker, the private banker saying, I'm not a believer, I don't get this thing, to I'm going to buy it because the marketing machines, like, is being turned on. But that doesn't mean he's understanding just the long-term potential.
Bitcoin's market is being transformed by institutional players, and Willy Woo sees immense potential for future growth. With new players like BlackRock helping to bring Bitcoin into the mainstream, the market is poised for a major leap. As Woo puts it, we're still early, and if you're wondering whether to get in, now might be the time to consider Bitcoin's next move. The future is unfolding right in front of us. Don't miss it.